A Washington player just inherited the entire weight of this defense. And in a minute, I'm telling you why that could blow up on Dan Quinn. Meanwhile, Jerjan Newton tore his pec and already had surgery, per Nikki Javala of The Athletic. And in a minute, I'm telling you if he's out for the opener against Philly. And Treylon Burks, the guy who used to hunt wild hogs back in Arkansas, is torching corners at camp right now. But there's something about his past that changes everything. Raise hail. Okay, let's talk about this the right way, because I think most of the public conversation about Frankie Luvu is still stuck on last year, and that is exactly the kind of lazy take I refuse to do on this channel. Let's start with the hard fact. According to Nikki Javala of The Athletic this week, both Darren Payne and Javon Kinlaw confirmed something a lot of us had been suspecting since camp opened. Frankie Luvu is already wearing the green dot during the early installation of Durante Jones's new defense. For anybody who does not know, the green dot's literal. There is a green dot on the player's helmet connected by radio straight to the defensive coordinator. That player gets the call, processes it in seconds, and has to communicate it to the other 10 men on the field before the play clock hits 0. That is not a decorative honor, that is pure responsibility. If Luvu messes up the communication, that is not one man's mistake, that is 11 guys out of alignment at once. And here is where it gets interesting, because this is not some minor role shuffle, it is a full identity shift. Last year, with injuries piling up across Washington, Luvu had to play a ton of snaps on the defensive edge, something he himself admitted he was not used to doing. Listen to what he actually said, because this is some of the most honest self-assessment I have heard from him in a while. He said he did a lot of critical self-scouting on his own game in 2025, and his conclusion was that he needed to get back to playing free within the scheme, not chasing plays outside of structure, doing his job in his own 1/11th of the field instead of freelancing. That, fam, is a massive statement coming from a guy who was second-team All-Pro in 2024. He is basically saying that last year he lost himself tactically out of pure roster necessity, and that 2026 is his year to get back to what made him special. Off-ball linebacker, attacking downhill, reading his keys instead of reacting late from the edge. Let's get into the numbers to understand exactly how much this man has been carrying. Luvu played 1,059 defensive snaps in 2024, the year he made All-Pro. In 2025, he played 1,107. That is roughly 97.5% of every defensive snap the team ran across 2 straight seasons. There is no rest in that number. He is an every down, every situation, every package kind of player. And now, on top of that physical load, they are handing him the full mental load of being the voice of the defense. Bobby Wagner is gone. As far as we know, he still has not signed anywhere, which is its own strange story for a player of his caliber. And honestly, I still have a hard time fully understanding why Washington could not find a way to keep him around one more year in a mentor role even at reduced snaps. But that is a conversation for another day. What matters for us is that Washington lost the man who wore the green dot the last 2 seasons, a future Hall of Famer with a full career's worth of experience reading offensive formations before the ball even moves. That kind of void does not get filled with talent alone. It gets filled with repetition, with trust from the rest of the locker room, and with the ability to communicate under pressure when 50,000 people are screaming in a road stadium. And this is not just abstract leadership stuff, it hits the field directly. When the green dot does not communicate fast and clean, you see open gaps, safeties late to their zone responsibility, corners unsure if they are in a match coverage rule or playing outside leverage. Y'all saw that last year in more than one game, when the defense looked disorganized in the first quarter before settling in. That to me is almost always a symptom of late communication, not missing talent. Now here is the part that fascinates me most, and I want to be precise about who said what. Dan Quinn was talking directly about Jeremy Reeves' communication skills this week in camp, calling them elite both on and off the field. And in that same answer, he explained that so much of what they do runs through a communication hub between linebacker and safety, naming Frankie Luvu right there as part of that group of initiators. Notice the detail. When the head coach is describing who holds together the central nervous system of his defense, Luvu is one of the first names that comes out of his mouth without hesitation. That leads me to the uncomfortable question I want to put in front of y'all today. Is this too much for one man? Look, I am going to be honest because that is why you are here. I love what I am seeing from Luvu on the leadership side. But I am also aware that we are asking him to do 3 things at once that rarely coexist well in a single player: be the primary vocal leader and communicator of a brand new scheme, shift his tactical role back to off-ball after a full year playing out of position, and on top of all that, still be, as always, a near 100% snap player. That is exhausting even for an athlete at his level. And the question nobody is asking out loud is what happens in week 12 with the body tired if the communications start slipping simply because the man physically no longer has that extra mental gas in the tank that role demands. I could be wrong, but I think Washington needs to find a real second voice of backup in that linebacker room before October rolls around. And that is where the piece that actually has me optimistic comes in. The group of linebackers around Luvu this year is, without exaggeration, the most talented he has had during his time in Washington. Leo Chenal came in as a free agent on a 3-year deal, a physical player who can take on gap integrity responsibility in run situations. Jordan Magee keeps developing in year 2. And Sonny Styles, the number 7 overall pick in this draft, is genuinely one of the most explosive athletes to enter that position group in years. A guy who can cover elite tight ends and also drop down and play in the box like a hybrid safety. That means even with Luvu wearing the dot, he is not going to be carrying that defense completely alone. He is going to have real quality young pieces around him, and that changes the math. If Chenal can take on secondary communication responsibility in sub-packages, and Styles shows he understands the scheme fast enough, that load naturally spreads out as the season goes on. Let me give y'all my prediction with a specific date and public accountability because that is how we do things on this channel. I believe that by the preseason game against the Lions on August 22nd, we are going to see Luvu operating in his communicator role with a lot more fluency than what we saw in the joint practices against Miami. And I believe that by the September 13th opener in Philadelphia, Durante Jones's defense is going to look considerably more organized in the first quarter than any season opener we had under the previous coordinator setup. If I am wrong, I will say so on this channel, no excuses. What I can guarantee y'all is this: Luvu is not taking this responsibility lightly. This man did critical self-scouting on his own game when he could have easily stayed quiet and cashed the check. That to me is the mark of a real leader, not just a locker room captain who yells motivational lines. If this Durante Jones bet pays off, they are going to have a defense with a clear identity from weekend. If it does not, it is going to be a long season of live adjustments every single Sunday in front of millions of people. Okay, fam, but while we are talking leadership and scheme installation, there is a much less optimistic story that came out of that same camp this week, and it is about the real depth of this defensive line. This is wild because right when we are talking about the defense having more young quality pieces, it turns out one of the most important pieces on that line just went down with a serious injury. Let's get straight into this one because it stings. On August 19th, Dan Quinn confirmed what a lot of us were fearing since Jerjan Newton, who everybody calls Johnny, left the joint practice against Miami with an upper body injury. According to the initial report from Nikki Javala of The Athletic, Newton hurt his pectoral and traveled to New York to see a specialist. That same day, reporter Jordan Schultz confirmed the worst case scenario. Newton underwent surgery for a torn pectoral muscle and is expected to miss significant time. Y'all don't understand how much this one hurts in career context. Newton has 82 tackles, 7 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, and a fumble recovery across 33 career games. 5 of those 7 sacks came just last season, including a 3-sack performance against Dallas on Christmas Day that a lot of us consider his best professional game to date. This is not a marginal rotation guy. This is a man who was on a real trajectory to become a locked-in starter alongside Darren Payne and Javon Kinlaw up front. And here is the piece that genuinely worries me. According to Justin Grasso's reporting, the recovery timeline is still not clear, but there is a real chance Newton could miss both matchups against Philadelphia this season. Think about that for a second. The regular season opener is September 13th against the Eagles specifically, and the rematch lands in Week 8. We are talking about the possibility of Washington walking into the biggest game on the early season calendar against the divisional rival that eliminated this roster in recent playoffs without one of its best defensive linemen available. And to make it worse, this is not an isolated case. Per that same Jobvala report we cited with the Luvu story, Dan Quinn also confirmed that Kalavan Chason has a knee injury, Odafe Owe suffered a calf strain, and Jordan Magee has a shoulder injury that is going to keep him out this week of practice. That is basically half the pass rush and linebacker group banged up at the same time, just weeks before the real start of the season. Now, let's be fair and put this in real tactical perspective, because I do not want to spiral into panic without cause. The good news, if there is any here, is that Washington does have genuine depth at interior defensive line. Darren Payne is still the anchor of the group, a guy who has been consistently productive. Javen Kinlaw came in as a free agent with high expectations of becoming a disruptive interior presence. And per Heavy's reporting this week, Tim Settle is in the process of ramping up his return right in the middle of this Newton news, which might not be a coincidence at all. But let's be honest with the real tactical breakdown here. Nobody in that rotation group replaces exactly what Newton brings. Newton is a player with genuine interior penetration ability, someone who can generate pass rush pressure from the 3 technique, something a rotational body does not replicate at the same level. If Durante Jones wants to install an aggressive scheme built on constant disguise and interior pressure as part of his defensive identity, losing one of the few players with that specific penetration profile is a real hit to the plan, not just a lower number on the roster sheet. My honest opinion here, and I know not everybody is going to like this, I think people are underselling the impact of this injury because it landed in August, buried under the noise of other camp storylines. But if I were Adam Peters, this would have me actively working the veteran free agent defensive tackle market right now, not waiting until the October trade deadline. This roster's contention window with Jaden Daniels as the franchise quarterback is right now, not 2 years from now, and you cannot afford to walk into Philadelphia on September 13th with real doubts up front against an Eagles offensive line that has, without exaggeration, been the best in football over the last 2 years. I am going to give y'all my prediction with an exact date, because on this channel, public accountability is the whole foundation of what we do. I believe by August 26th, cut down day for the 53-man roster, we are going to see Washington add at least one more piece on the interior defensive line, whether through another team's waiver wire or a low-cost veteran free agent move, and I believe Newton realistically misses the September 13th opener against Philadelphia. If I am wrong on either one of those, I will tell y'all on this exact channel, no filters. What we do know for certain is this: the defensive line depth that a few months ago looked like one of this roster's most solid strengths now has a real crack in it. And in a division as competitive as the NFC East, with Philadelphia still being the team to beat, there is no room to assume this just fixes itself. Fam, after that news, I needed something to bring my energy back up a little, and I got it. Because while the defensive line deals with injuries, there is a receiver on the other side of the ball coming off one of the wildest backstories I have read in months, and honestly, I have to tell it in full. This is wild for real. According to a profile Kevin Reynolds published for The Banner on August 20th, when Treylon Burks was younger back in Arkansas, he used to go hog hunting with his family on weekends. I am not making this up, fam. They would sit in the dense woods near a town called Warren, send a bulldog out to circle the hogs, and once they were penned in, Burks would move in to finish the job. And Burks himself admitted there were times the hogs won that fight. He said, word for word, that he had to climb trees a couple of times because those 200-pound hogs are genuinely dangerous. Now, why am I telling y'all this instead of just running through the stats? Because I think that story explains this man's mentality perfectly, and the connection to his career is almost poetic if you think about it. Burks spent his last few NFL years on the defensive, running, trying to survive, exactly like when a hog broke containment and he had to climb a tree to save himself. Let's get into the career facts because they matter for full context. Burks entered the league as the 18th overall pick in the 2022 draft, selected by Tennessee after the Titans traded their own first-round pick, which they got by sending A.J. Brown to Philadelphia to move up and get him. Think about that trade for a second. Tennessee moved on from a receiver who is now a consistent Pro Bowler for the money and draft capital they used to select Burks. Brown went on to win a Super Bowl in Philadelphia. Burks, meanwhile, sprained his LCL in year 2, tore his ACL in year 3, and fractured his collarbone in a joint practice before he could even play another game. Tennessee, tired of waiting, cut him before his rookie contract was even done, and that is where Washington comes in with a move that honestly I think is one of the smartest low-risk plays Adam Peters made this offseason. They gave Burks a 1-year, $4 million deal. The logic is simple. If it works, they have a first-round talent profile receiver at bargain price. If it does not work, the cost is minimal, and the team moves on without any real cap damage. And so far, fam, it is working. Burks played 8 games last season and made a one-handed Odell Beckham Jr. style touchdown catch on Sunday Night Football against Denver. This offseason, he dropped 10 pounds and is now one of the fastest players on Washington's entire roster. For a while, it looked like he might directly compete for the number 2 receiver job until the team signed Stephon Diggs, which shifted the room's hierarchy but did not take him out of the equation. The first full day of camp, he announced himself on a contested ball in the end zone. Jaden Daniels lofted it up high, and Burks rose above veteran corner Amik Robertson for a perfectly toe-tap touchdown. And just a few days ago, Dan Quinn stopped specifically on a practice rep where Burks was tightly covered by corner Fabian Moreau. The coverage was good, Quinn said, but Burks' catch radius, his length, and his ability to go get the ball at its highest point meant Moreau simply could not get around him. Quinn closed by saying Burks is an excellent competitor and that they are very pleased with where he is at right now. My honest take here, and I am not going to lie, this is one of those stories that grabs me more than I probably should admit in a serious breakdown. There is something about watching an 18th overall pick once compared to AJ Brown hit rock bottom through 3 major injuries and a release, and still show up smiling telling hog-hunting stories to his new teammates. That makes me want to see him succeed in a way that goes beyond the stat sheet. That said, I have to be honest about the obvious concern. Burks' injury history is real, and it does not disappear just because he had a good offseason. LCL, ACL, a fractured collarbone, those are serious injuries, and his contested catch style at the highest point of the ball carries constant physical risk. But for the first time in his pro career, in his own words, this was the first full offseason where he did not have to fight back from an injury. For a 26-year-old athlete finally in his best physical shape, that is a genuinely positive sign. My prediction, with a date and public accountability as always, I believe by the game against the Lions on August 22nd, Burks is going to have at least one explosive play that starts pulling national attention his way. And I believe by the end of the regular season, he ends up as the team's most productive number 3 receiver by yards per catch. If I am wrong, y'all know where to find me to say it on camera. And there it is, fam. 3 stories, 3 completely different realities on this roster. Frankie Louvu taking on a massive responsibility as this defense's new communicator, with real questions about whether it is too much for one man, but surrounded by real young talent that can spread that load out as the season rolls on. Johnny Newton sidelined for a timeline we still do not fully know, leaving a real crack in the defensive line right before the biggest early season clash against Philadelphia. And Treylon Burks, a man who went from running from hogs in the Arkansas woods to being one step away from becoming one of the best redemption stories this roster has had in years. I could be wrong on any of today's predictions, and if I am, I will tell y'all right here on this channel. No excuses. Because that is how we build real trust with this community. But what I have zero doubt about is this. This franchise has more talent depth and more compelling human stories right now than at any recent point in its history. Burgundy and gold, always. If this video gave you something, hit that like button, subscribe, and tell me down in the comments. Do you trust Frankie Louvu as this defense's new vocal leader? Or do you think Washington needs to go find veteran communication help before the season kicks off? I want to read every single answer. See y'all in the next one.